And we're in conversation with Lukhanyo Calata, the son of Forte Calata, and our very own SABC colleague here. And he has, of course, written a book with his wife, Abigail, called My Father Died for This. My Father Died for This. And now, despite two attempts at reopening the case of his father's death as part of the Cradock 4 at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC says there's still nobody prosecuted for the murders. And at the end, Lukhanyo voices his disappointment in the post-apartheid government. He also concludes that the circumstances around the death of the Cradock 4 is probably one of the secret agreements that the government may have reached with the apartheid leaders who tried negotiating themselves out of facing the consequences of their evil deeds. And that's quite, a serious statement to put out there. We saw the Timol inquest, reopening of the Timol inquest recently. There was also the Noctula Simelane. So I can imagine how that must have stirred something in you, Lukhanyo.
Oh, very deeply. I looked at, when I was writing the final chapter, just a couple of days or so, the Judge Billy Motley had delivered his judgment in the Timol matter, And I said in the book that although I celebrated that judgment with the Timol family, I had very little doubt that the ANC-led government would in any way rush to go and prosecute those people that were responsible. How far are we down the line now? It's over 6 months. The NPA has still not moved, has still not charged those, even though they were ordered by a court of law to investigate and to charge those people that were responsible, for the death of Ahmed Timol. Look at the obstinance that the government has been putting in place and all the obstacles that they're putting in place, in the Noctula Simelane matter. Last week, there was a judge that had to once again tell the government that they must pay. You know what I mean? That they must pay for the defense of these police officers. Why is it? Why is there a lack in moving on these matters? Because a couple of months ago, we saw this gentleman, I just forgot his name, but he died at the age of 96, waiting for justice for his family. None of that came, Now, do they want the same thing to happen? Do they want my mother to pass? Do they want Mrs. Goniwe to pass? Do they want all of these people who are sitting there waiting for justice? Is that what the ANC government wants? Because how else do we try to explain to ourselves why is it that the ANC government has not moved? Remember also that in the case of the Cradock 4, very simple, on the 28th of May 1994, 18 days after Nelson Mandela was sworn in and became the first democratic president of our republic, Judge Neville Zitzman sat, and in his judgment said that in the case of the Cradock 4, he found that the state was responsible for their murders. Right? He couldn't pinpoint individuals responsible, but he found that the state was responsible. So, 18 days into our new democracy, 18 days, the ANC had the opportunity to go and charge and prosecute these people. The TRC took place. People came forward. They applied for amnesty. They weren't granted amnesty. The TRC handed 300 cases to the government to say, these are cases that we, the TRC, give you to say that you must prosecute. The case of the Cradock 4 was one of those cases. We are now sitting over 20 years later. The ANC government has still not moved. Now we must ask the question, why is it? What is it that they're hiding?
And this is evidently not what your father died for.
No, of course it's not what my father died for. Of course not. Because imagine if my father knew that he was going to get killed and nobody would ever bother with justice for his life. Nobody would ever bother to look after his family. Nobody would ever bother to, you know what I mean? Imagine if he knew that. Do you think he would have gotten into the car? Do you think he would have led the people of Lingelihle to a successful revolution in Lingelihle in Cradock? I don't think so. Imagine how Mrs. Goniwe must feel.
And Abigail, your part in this book, absolutely loved it. It weaves that light and shade as you go through the book. And your story with your mother-in-law, Nomonde Calata, beautiful story, and how you first had the guts to just call her up because you had a feeling, you felt a presence, and from there, I mean, it's just such a beautiful story to read.
Yeah, it was a great story to tell as well. My mother-in-law, she's a phenomenal woman, and you know, I'm really privileged to be her daughter, because that's how she refers to me. I'm not her daughter-in-law. She calls me her daughter. I'm completely integrated into the family and completely loved and accepted. And to hear her stories, it was the best experience. It was one of the best interviews, because obviously I've got a journalism background as well, and I've done many interviews, but these were some of the best interviews that I'd ever done. They were heart-wrenching, you know. There were times when we were crying together. There were times when, you know, her face lit up as she remembered how she fell in love with Forte, how the time when Lukhanyo was born. It was also a very happy, celebratory time. And yeah, we just have such a connection, Nomonde and I, and it was a real honor and a real privilege to be able to tell her story.
And it's a beautiful story, Nomonde, and her meeting Lukhanyo's father at the age of 15. He was 17, and how that love story just unfolds. It's a beautiful, beautiful book, and it's full of, you know, great little tidbits. There's history, there's love stories, and, you know, there are so many pivotal moments where you are forced to stop and think about what it is that a Forte Calata, a Matthew Goniwe, and others died for. But this book, of course, now on the shelves. It's being launched officially tonight, and I just have to say thank you to our authors here, Lukhanyo Calata and his wife Abigail, co-authors of the book My Father Died for This, a book that certainly captures the life of Forte Calata, the father he never knew, and the circumstances surrounding his death and the death of those he was murdered with, including Matthew Goniwe, as part of the Cradock 4. With that, it's time for news.